Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business, share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today has been in his own business for about the last 15 years, but he has experience across multiple sectors, and he's also a keen golfer. I'm delighted to welcome Brian McDonald to the Junior Business Studio. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Alec. How are you?
Hi. I'm going to take you back to your last years in school. Some people were just wanted to travel, some wanted to get into the workforce, some just kind of left early. Where were you in the whole scheme of things and what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I left early.
All
I
right.
I, I left early. I wanted to make money. I was most interested in. Um, I would have always probably wanted to work for myself.
Yeah.
How to get there would be another thing. My uncle was a great influence on me, and he had his own business.
All right.
So he had a shop, and he was also a photographer.
All
Uh,
right.
an old
So I
Capital.
mean retail. So he grabbed you into the world of retail.
He did, and that's what I got into when I left school. And I figured he had loads of money. He looked like somebody who had loads of money, so I thought, well, that's a good starting point. So I got into retail, left school at 15, and just got straight into retail there.
Why
After
not?
that,
Why not?
Well,
And this is it. I mean, the interesting thing about retail is you're thrust into the world of business and meeting people, so you learn to network fairly quickly.
you do, and it is a customer facing role, obviously, when you're working on a shop floor, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot about people, how to present yourself with people, and obviously then you know I think it was Marks and Spencers that used to have a phrase along the lines of, we don't do the minimum, we try to do the maximum
All right.
um, for our customers, and that was a good, maybe not something you see all the time. Whereas, you
Hmm.
ask somebody a question, they give you an answer. Whereas, other people then will elaborate, other people will try to help, other people will try to do the maximum. Uh, some
Yeah.
just do, some
And
just
I
do.
mean, from retail, and we see it all the time, that a little goes a long way. Like even something simple in a supermarket, when you ask for a particular product and somebody actually walks you to the aisle as opposed to says, "Oh, it's over there somewhere."
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that would have been a big, that would have been sort of, I'm going to say beat India, but you know what I mean. But
It
you
would have
would have
been
definitely
impressed upon you.
impressed upon you that, yeah,
We'll do
absolutely,
that.
walk the person to the aisle, and not just, yeah, three aisles down there on the left.
Yeah, but you got involved with a U training program as well, as I understand.
Yeah, so when I left school, God, 1984, the unemployment was very high. And I think it was Margaret Thatcher, who was in power at the time, had brought in she wanted people off the dole. She wanted young people working and not sort of languishing on the dole. So she brought in what was called the YTP, the Youth Training Program.
Hmm.
So I was a beneficiary of that in my first ever job. 26.75 a week,
Right.
working in Woolworths, which was a large sort of department store in Belfast.
The 3 and 6 pence store, as I think it used to be, or 3 and 6 cent stores. It was known in America, wasn't it, or something like that?
So yeah, it was just massive, and it sold everything. It was unreal. Records, CDs,
Yeah, and
vegetables,
and don't forget the sweets.
sweets. Absolutely massive, big. Remember, massive big aisles of all different kinds of sweets.
Yeah.
That was there were some good people in there. Like I was there for a couple of years. I look back with fond memories on it. It was good. And look, Belfast at the time, there was a lot of trouble in Belfast at the time. Um, as you can imagine,
Sure.
the humor was also very high on the agenda. So working these people making the sense of humor that people have to have in Belfast was great. So it was yeah, it was great to get into the workforce.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you're getting training as well, and you're also with seeing how a larger company works. But you weren't going to be staying there forever, so you had ambitions to move on.
yeah, so I had always ambitions to open up my own shop. Now, what kind of shop at the time, I didn't really know, but I went from Woolworth to a men's clothes outlet called Foster Menswear,
Right.
and that was part of a bigger chain called Sears. And I spent a bit of time there. I then get into a more, let's say, trendy men's clothes shop, which was called Warehouse, and
Right.
they opened up their first men's shop in Belfast, the first men's shop ever in Belfast. Jeff Banks was the guy who was the brainchild behind that.
And a good
Uh,
designer he was too.
he was brilliant, yeah, and he was really, really nice guy. And I was his first employee in the main shop. And they opened subsequently about 4 or 5 more in the UK. So I worked there for a couple of years and then decided to set up on my own shop.
It must have been interesting just seeing somebody like Jeff Banks. The expansion of his business in terms of opening up a number of outlets, but also the fact that he was a fashion designer and fairly much, on the pulse at the time.
Yeah, and he was, and he just had this presence about him, as well as like he's immaculately groomed. He, in my opinion, he made clothes to be worn and to look well. He didn't have to do the outlandish stuff to get noticed. His clothes were just very, very well cut, well fashionable without being over the top. And and he built that business. And I guess he was a fashion. I mean, the one thing that I learned there was he was the fashion designer, but he partnered with people who ran businesses. So he didn't try to run the business. He stuck
Yeah.
to what he knew. So so that was it. Whether he ever looked at a balance sheet or a profit and loss, I don't know. I'm sure he did, but I'm sure he didn't.
Yeah, he was the figurehead, really. He had a sense of style, as you said, but he also made fashion accessible to the mainstream public.
I think so. I think so, and I think that doing that within Warehouse, the prices weren't, as well as it not being outlandish clothes, the prices were reasonable as well for what you would consider to be designer fashion at the time, which
Um,
which was full of people like Jean Paul Gaultier and Paul Smith, and their clothes were very expensive.
sure.
So
But
yeah,
that's the next chapter. And if you're joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Here, where my guest today is Brian McDonald. And we were just talking about your experience with a warehouse in Belfast and sort of being at the cutting front of fashion as it was. But that was to inspire you to go out on your own and set up your own business. Tell us a bit about that.
yeah. So um, Belfast at the time, Northern Ireland at the time, it didn't have any of the really top fashion designers. It didn't have your Jean Paul Gaultier. It didn't have your Helen Story or Nicole Farry. And myself and my partner at the time, my girlfriend at the time, decided that that would be a
Hmm.
good business to get into. That you know there was a lot of disposable income in Belfast because like houses were so much cheaper, rent was cheap, and the civil service employed an awful lot of people, so there was quite a lot of disposable income as people and people liked to go out. They didn't have, obviously, again, there was a lot of trouble, so people didn't have maybe a lot to look forward to other than the weekend. So we decided to set up a shop called Earth Clothing. The a lot of the designers at the time were doing what they called their diffusion range.
Sure.
It was the same, the name, the John Paul Gaultier name, the Nicole Farry name, their influence on the design, but at a much more accessible price. John Paul Gaultier was John Paul Gaultier Jr. Nicole Farry was Nicole Farry Diffusion. So we decided then I went to one of my first trips ever to London, had been before, and we made contact with a lot of the designers, and how we ended up. Well, what I learned very quickly, just phoning them from Belfast, what I learned very quickly is nobody wanted to be the first to jump.
Yeah,
So
right.
it
Okay.
wasn't until we told John Paul Gaultier that we had Nicole Farry, and we told Nicole Farry that we had John Paul Gaultier, and we told them Helen Story and Vivian Westwood and all the rest of them that we
Yeah.
had all. Then they all went, oh, you have Nicole Farry. I'm interested. And
I
Nicole
love
Farry.
that. I love that about the entrepreneur and the
Yeah,
little white lies we have to tell to get something over the line. And but the
absolutely.
excitement of those days and those negotiations and finding the premises and setting it up, there's a real buzz around that.
It's a real buzz. You get the shop, it was a shell. We were on a very, very tight budget, very, very tight. As you imagine, I was like 21 or so at the time. We availed of the Prince's Trust. So Prince Charles at the time had set up a trust to try and help young people specifically to set up businesses. So we availed of that for the tune of a grant for £5,000, which was huge at the time.
Sure.
There were so many vacant units in Belfast as well, so we got a lovely shop that we managed to negotiate a year's free rent on.
Right.
We literally painted the place ourselves, scraped together rails and racking for the walls to display the clothes. Went to London, met the designers, bought the stuff, got it in. Had a huge opening, which went really, really well. And yeah, and it really, really took off, and people were just delighted to have it. It was because it was a real mix. If you know Nicole Farry, her
Hmm.
stuff is quite classical in its makeup and its look, and the
Yeah.
colors are all quite greens and beiges and whatever. I'm doing it in
Muted colors. Huh?
yeah, but it was lovely stuff. It was really, really good stuff. And then you've got John Paul Gaultier, which is obviously wacky and bright and
Eccentric, I think, Brian. It's not
eccentric.
very.
Yeah, cutting edge stuff. So we had a diverse range of clothes, and so therefore we had a diverse range of customers as well, and it was brilliant. It was great fun, and that fashion scene in Belfast was although small, it would have had your, would have
Hmm.
had all your hairdressers, all your little boutique type shops. We all knew each other. There was only one or two nightclubs to go to in Belfast at the time, so yeah, look, it was brilliant. Despite all that was going on in Belfast in the 80s, it was still a fantastic thing to be involved in.
Yeah, and yeah, in exciting times, but unfortunately, they weren't going to last. Um,
No,
Obviously, the political tensions and things going on in the background were going to play a part in the demise of it. Just talk about that and sort of, I suppose, just share your experience of that for a couple of minutes.
yeah, so like it wouldn't have been unusual to for Belfast to be sort of evacuated at any time. It wouldn't have been unusual that the police would come around. There's a bomb scare. We need you to close. We need you to go. That would have happened nearly on a weekly basis,
Right.
and quite often on a Saturday as well, which would be our biggest trading day. So that would have happened quite regularly, and us being in the city centre, we would have been a victim of the bomb scares, and we would have
Sure.
had to close up. But we traded away, and we did quite well. That lasted 4 years, and then we just had an horrendous year in Belfast, with violence,
Yeah.
and there was, July was always a powder keg month anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but from July, and I'm going to say, so 86 was a really, really bad year. And we became a victim of the troubles. December the year before, we had turned over about 30,000 sterling. December that year, we turned over less than three.
Yeah.
There was months where nobody would come into town, and we just had to, unfortunately, we had to close the business.
Yeah, it just was untenable, and it's unfortunate exterior forces of which you've no control, are the driving force. And I mean, it's very disappointing when you put a lot of time, energy, and enthusiasm into something, and then having to dismantle it.
Dismantle it and break it down, and go to banks and go to suppliers. And
Yeah,
most of our suppliers were UK based. So look, they understood, they could see the news, they knew what was going on in the north of Ireland. They were very reasonable about everything. Some just took their clothes back. Some didn't want them and just settled for the fact that they weren't getting any money. They were very sympathetic, obviously, with everything that was going on in the north. They were very sympathetic to what was going on, and they knew. So they knew that it wasn't somebody trying to get away without paying their bills.
no.
They knew it was we were a victim as much as anything. So it took a few months to sort of wind it up, and let everybody go. And I worked in the business myself on a full-time basis, so I was there every day.
Yes.
We had a couple of staff members, and they went off to better things, and we closed up the shop.
And all right, I mean, there was a new chapter going to open in your life, and you mentioned before you had done the markets, which must have been fascinating and a whole new lesson in retailing.
Yeah, it was good. It was certainly earlier mornings. Maybe not the buzzy nightlife scene that sort of came with the cutting edge fashion side of things. Certainly not the cutting edge fashion in the markets, but it was a learning curve.
Yeah.
You could really see people, like, you really had to hustle to, you needed to be there early. You needed to get a good pitch. There were certain people in the markets who were markets traders for years. They had their pitch, could never take that. But the closer you could get to the center, obviously, the more people that you got. And it was enjoyable. I did it for about a year. And it, like say maybe 4 mornings a week, I'd have been in the car early, freezing cold, rain, driving, pitching up a little marquee. And
Well, there are lessons in life, and but there was a new chapter going to open in your life, and I'll talk to you about that in just a second. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Brian McDonald. We were just talking about the sort of the rag trade, but you were to move on. IT was to catch your eye and take you on a journey.
I mean, IT. To tell you, when I was about 14, our school got an old BBC computer. I remember it came in only for a couple of days. This is how rare these things were. It was traveling around all of the schools to give all of the kids a flavor of what it was like to have a computer. And I remember it well. You had to type sort of like REM, line 10, REM, dash, dash, dash. So it literally took about 5 minutes to add 10 and 10 together to get 20. So this is my foresight into the world. I thought these things will never take off. This just takes too long. Anyway, sort of say 6 or 7 years later, I decided to go back to college. Well, 10 years later, I decided to go back to college and do a business IT course. And it was more, Alec, to do with learning how computers would live in the corporate world.
Sure.
So there wasn't a practical side of it. It was all theory.
Yeah.
That lasted about 3 months. I just not inclined to sit at the books, and I got a job in an IT company called Opus Solutions. It was small. It sold software called Sage. They built computers for their customers. They put in networks. It was all a small company, and everybody got to do a bit of everything. And it just was much better than learning the theory of it. Learning how to build a computer, learning how to install a network was much better. 16 meg of RAM at the time. It was about 250 sterling.
Right.
The biggest hard drive you could get was a half a gig, and it was huge to even get a 500 meg hard drive.
Yeah.
And I stayed there for a few years, and it was great fun and a great learning experience. And I learned, that was me learning all about using a computer, learning what a network was all about. Obviously, it's a completely different ballgame now, but
Yes, of course.
to understand the basics was very good. And then that led me to Dublin via a friend of mine who set up a recruitment company. She needed a laptop, or sorry, laptop. She needed a
Laptop,
PC.
that would have been good.
Laptops would have been laptops paid about a ton back then. She needed PCs and a network, and I built them for her. She set me up with an interview with the managing director of Canon in Northern Ireland at the time. I took that job, I left Opus Solutions, went to Canon, and that was my route to Dublin back in 2000.
Yeah. And okay, so I mean, not alone a change in occupation and but also a change in location. Obviously completely different to Belfast. I'm gathering from what you told me earlier, you were like a duck to water to that.
I absolutely loved it. I like, from from the first day of setting foot, from when I knew I was there, living in Kilmainham, which is, a
Yeah.
15-minute walk into the center of Dublin. It was just fantastic. And Dublin was just buzzing. It was really the start of the noughties, everybody seemed to be making a fortune. You go to the hole in the wall, the smallest denomination note was a 50 at a time when you could still get a £5 note in Belfast, from the cash machine. It was just a different world, and buzzy, and loads of business being done. And of course, from my point of view, being in sales and being on the phone and making appointments, my accent was a curiosity for everybody. And the fact that I came from the Falls Road in Belfast was a big talking point with everybody. So
All right.
I really learned how to play on that,
Good
on
one.
that part of things. And look, every conversation that I had with people, where do you come from, came up, in every sales meeting,
Yeah.
and it definitely was a big help, being from there. Maybe got a certain amount of sympathy as well. I don't know, but yeah, Dublin was just really buzzing. 2001 right up. It was great. I was so delighted to make the move. I sort of, in my head, I was going, well, I'll go down for a year. Like, what's the worst that happen? I'll stay for a year. I'd say I wasn't even a week in Dublin, and I knew I'd never go back.
Well, there we go. You
Yeah.
were convinced straight away. And believe it or not, as time is moving on, and I've about 3 or 4 minutes left, I do know you moved on to Bryan Ryan, but in the back of your own mind, there was always going to be an ambition to set up your own business. So maybe let's
Absolutely.
talk about that for the last few minutes we've got.
So in 2011, I set up a company called Highline Office Technology with a guy who I had met, and the two of us set it up, 50-50 partnership, and we just hit the ground running. The downturn had happened in Dublin. People were looking to save money. We were both good salespeople. We both knew what needed to be done. We both knew the more people we could talk to, the more chance for success there was, the more sales there would be.
Mm-hmm.
And we just took a little managed office and just got on the phones, and that was it. We've grown the business now. We just bought over one of our competitors, and we've grown
Excellent.
the business to, over 1,000 customers. We are Canon's second biggest partner in Ireland. And it was always an ambition because I came from a Canon background, I suppose the ambition was always to sell Canon for me. And now, like I say, we're their second biggest partner in Ireland. I'd say within 5 years we'll be their biggest. And there's 15 of us now, and it's just phenomenal. And just even myself and my business partner, I mean, one of the things was we always said is we're going to do this while it's good crack. And as soon as it's not, we'll sell up or we'll do whatever. But as you know, it was having fun was going to be as big a part of anything as growing a business or making money or whatever. It had to be, you know, we had to have a bit of crack along the way.
No, I think it's a great philosophy, and it's funny enough, it's one I had with my own business partner who I was with for 25 years. Just, I suppose, to come for the last minute or so, what would you think would be the key secret to having a long-lasting relationship with a business partner, if you were to kind of sum it up in a sentence?
Yeah, from his point of view, he's a lot calmer than me, and he knows my sort of form, I suppose. We're very, very similar in the way we go about things, I suppose. And we both realize that sometimes I'm working harder than he is, sometimes he's working harder than me, but it all equals out in the end. Um, we don't, we, whatever, every success we share in it 50-50. So we are 50-50. We've always been 50-50. We take the same salaries,
Yes.
we take the same allowances, and we take the same holidays and everything else. So there's nothing that's unequal, let's say.
Yeah,
And I think
nothing
that's
to
going to be,
niggle the other one.
yeah. There's nothing, yeah. I think any successful partnership, if you had a partner for 25 years, that's phenomenal. Most partnerships break down within a year or two.
Yeah.
So we've been partners for 15. I'd say over that time we probably had two minor arguments. And he, like myself, we don't, we argue, we walk out, come back into work the next day, and it's just forgotten about. But there's a good division of labor. I like systems. Maybe that's my IT background. I like systems, and I like to put systems in place for things.
Great.
And he likes people and sales, and as much as I do the sales as well, I probably the operations side is my strong point, and not to say that he's not good at it, not to say he doesn't contribute, but he's happy enough
Fantastic.
if I
Yeah,
want to
no, that's
progress.
great. Listen, in the 10 seconds we've got, where can people find information about you? What's the web address in that?
Highline.ie, HIGHLINE.ie.
Oh, what a great way to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest, Brian McDonald, for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks to Stephen on sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.
Thank you.